Hank had been a mutant since childhood, and his feet were completely different from those of a normal human. Those very feet gave him the power to run at incredible speeds. But he never wanted to live his whole life being different like a mutant. He wanted the life of a normal human being. That's why he created a serum that could possibly remove his mutation and turn him into an ordinary person. But the moment he injected the serum into his legs, his feet suddenly became normal like those of a regular human. However, within moments, strange changes started happening inside his body. His legs began growing even larger, faster, and more terrifying than before. At the same time, his entire body transformed into a blue-colored beast-like creature. This story takes place during World War II, where Nazi soldiers are separating Americans into two groups. Among them is a family consisting of a mother and her young son. But when the child is separated from his mother, he cannot bear the pain. Desperately trying to reach her, he stretches out his hand toward her. However, this boy is no ordinary child. He is a mutant with extraordinary powers. As he extends his hand, everything around him suddenly begins getting pulled toward him. It feels as if he has become a giant magnet. Metal objects start flying in his direction, and even the iron bars around him begin bending. This incredible display of power catches the attention of the camp's general commander, a man named Shaw. Shaw immediately orders the boy to be brought into his office. Once there, Shaw places a small metal coin on the table in front of him and says that if he can move the coin using his powers, he will reunite him with his mother. The boy, whose real name is Eric, tries with all his strength, but no matter how hard he focuses, he cannot move the coin even slightly. Furious, Shaw cruelly shoots Eric's mother right in front of him. The moment Eric sees this, overwhelming rage consumes him. He completely loses control of himself, and because of his anger, every metal object in the room suddenly starts flying violently through the air. Everything around them begins floating as if gravity itself has stopped working. Shaw becomes terrified after witnessing the true extent of Eric's powers, and he immediately runs away from the room. Meanwhile, in 1944, another young boy is introduced whose name is Charles. He is also a mutant and possesses powerful telepathic abilities. One night, when Charles wakes up to drink water, he discovers an unknown girl hiding inside his house. The girl has completely blue skin and her name is Mystique. Over time, the two of them develop a very close friendship, and eventually they begin living together like brother and sister. 18 years later, Eric has now grown into an adult, and he is determined to kill every person responsible for his mother's death. His room is covered with photographs of his targets. One by one he plans to hunt them all down and take their lives. At the same time, another important character is introduced, Moira. Moira is actually a CIA agent who becomes suspicious of a US colonel. In order to confirm her suspicions, she secretly follows him. The colonel eventually arrives to meet Shaw. Shaw himself is also a mutant, possessing the ability to absorb different forms of energy. He can stop explosions or massive blasts with his bare hands and completely absorb their power. Since Shaw is a mutant himself, he has also assembled his own powerful team. The first member is Emma Frost, who possesses strong telepathic powers and can also transform her body into crystal form. The second member is Azazel, who has the power of teleportation. The third is Riptide, who can create devastating storms and tornado-like attacks anywhere around him. Shaw orders the colonel to redirect the US missile locations toward Turkey. However, the colonel refuses and warns him that doing so could start a war between Turkey and America, potentially changing the course of the entire world conflict. He insists that he cannot do such a thing. Shaw then threatens to kill him. At that very moment, Azazel teleports the colonel directly into the president's war room. Under immense pressure, the colonel is ultimately forced to change the missile targeting coordinates toward Turkey. The next day, the colonel confronts Shaw and demands a huge amount of money in exchange for carrying out his orders. He threatens that if Shaw refuses, he will blow up the entire ship using a grenade. But Shaw calmly takes the grenade from his hand and detonates it himself. As the explosion erupts, Shaw absorbs the entire blast energy into his own body. He then redirects that absorbed power straight back at the colonel, instantly killing him on the spot. Meanwhile, Moira, who had followed the colonel all the way to Shaw's secret location, witnesses several mutants working alongside Shaw. Realizing that only one person can help stop them, she decides to seek out Charles Xavier. Moira arrives and explains the entire situation to Charles. After hearing everything, Charles says that in order to fight Shaw, they must first build a team of mutants capable of standing against him. However, to make such a team official, they will need government approval. Without it, they will never be able to act freely against Shaw. Because of this, the CIA eventually sponsors the creation of a special facility called Division X. As soon as Division X is established, Charles uses his telepathic abilities to help locate Shaw. Once they finally discover his location, Charles attempts to connect his mind directly to Shaw's mind. However, Emma Frost interferes and blocks Charles completely, shutting down all of his telepathic attempts. At that same moment, Eric arrives at Shaw's ship with the intention of killing him, but Shaw's team throws Eric out of the ship and into the water. Even then, Eric uses all of his strength to continue chasing the ship, but he eventually begins drowning beneath the ocean. Just before he dies, Charles arrives in time and saves Eric's life. At Division X, Charles tells Eric that they need his help in stopping dangerous mutants like Shaw. However, Eric replies that he has no interest in joining their team. He tells Charles to focus on his own mission while he handles his own work separately. At Division X, a scientist named Hank is introduced. Hank has created a highly advanced machine called Cerebro, a device capable of greatly enhancing telepathic power. Charles Xavier uses Cerebro, and through it he is suddenly able to sense the locations of mutants all around the world. Eventually, Eric agrees to work alongside Charles because he realizes that hunting Shaw alone would only waste his energy. Charles and Eric then travel to different parts of the world in search of mutants they can recruit into their team. During their journey they encounter Logan. After that, they successfully recruit 4 new mutants into the team: Angel, Salvador, Banshee, Havoc, and Darwin. Each of them possesses unique powers. These are all young and inexperienced mutants who still do not fully understand the extent of their abilities, their strengths, or their weaknesses. Charles begins training them and teaches them how to properly control and use their powers. At the same time, Charles also spends time helping Eric improve his abilities. Eric possesses the power to manipulate magnetic fields and control metal objects. At one point, Charles asks Eric to bend a satellite dish standing far away from them. Eric says that it is too far, but he still tries to focus on it and bend it using his powers. Despite repeated attempts, he fails. Charles then tells him never to use his powers through anger alone. He explains that he must combine both love and rage together because only then will his abilities truly reach their full potential. Charles's words deeply affect Eric. Taking his advice seriously, Eric focuses again, and this time he finally succeeds. Meanwhile, Shaw is secretly working with a Russian colonel to prepare plans for an attack that could throw the entire world into chaos. Moira discovers information about these plans and immediately informs the entire Division X team. The team heads out to secretly listen to the colonel and prevent the coming disaster because if the plan succeeds, nations around the world could turn against each other and trigger a catastrophic war. However, after arriving there, they realize that Shaw never actually came to the meeting. Instead, Emma Frost is present in his place. Since Shaw is absent, they decide to capture Emma Frost and imprison her inside a CIA detention facility. After capturing her, they finally uncover Shaw's true plan. Shaw wants to start a nuclear war between the United States and Russia so that humanity will destroy itself completely. He believes that mutants are far superior to humans and deserve to inherit the Earth. His dream is to create a new empire ruled entirely by mutants without any humans remaining. When Shaw learns that Emma Frost has been captured by the agents, he immediately attacks Division X in the United States, where all the newly recruited mutants are staying. Upon arriving there, Shaw begins trying to manipulate the young mutants. He tells them that they are far superior to ordinary humans and that they should not waste their incredible powers serving mankind. He invites them to join him instead. The young mutants become angry after hearing his words and attack him. However, Shaw is extremely powerful, and the mutants fighting alongside him are also far stronger and more experienced than the new recruits. They quickly overpower the young mutants. Eventually, Angel Salvador decides to join Shaw's side. During the battle, Darwin is also killed. When Charles Xavier and Eric learn about everything that happened, they immediately return to Division X. After that, intense training begins for the team. Each mutant receives specially designed equipment that helps them focus and control their powers more effectively. At the same time, Mystique and Hank grow closer to each other. Both of them secretly wish to live like normal humans because they dislike living as mutants. Because of this, Hank begins experimenting with Mystique's blood. Eventually, he tells her that he has successfully developed a formula that could potentially change their mutant appearance back into a human form. However, Mystique refuses to use it. She tells Hank that she is happy with who she truly is and accepts her mutant identity completely. She says that if Hank wishes to change himself and become human again, then he is free to do so. Affected by her words but still desperate to change himself, Hank decides to test the formula on his own body. At first, the experiment appears successful, and he temporarily looks completely human again. But soon the transformation goes horribly wrong. His entire body mutates into a massive blue beast-like form. However, because the serum also contains Mystique's DNA, Hank's physical powers become far more enhanced than before. Even so, his appearance has now changed completely. Meanwhile, Shaw successfully convinces the Russian government to attack the United States. Along with their support, the Russians also provide Shaw with a special helmet capable of blocking telepathic attacks. From that moment onward, nobody can enter Shaw's mind or read his thoughts anymore. Following Shaw's manipulation, the Russian government sends its naval ships toward the American fleet. When U.S. President John F. Kennedy learns that the Russian ships are crossing the line, he immediately orders American warships to move toward the area as well. Soon, both fleets stand directly in front of each other, creating an extremely dangerous standoff where war could begin at any moment. At this point, Shaw makes a clever move. Inside the Russian ships, he secretly has all the pilots and naval officers killed because he fears that they might back out at the last moment and stop the attack. But at that very moment, the entire X-Men team arrives. Using one of the Russian ships, they destroy another Russian vessel. When the American warships witness this, they become confused and begin wondering why the Russians would destroy their own ship. Because of this confusion, the American fleet decides to retreat and move away from the area. In this way, a massive global disaster is prevented. However, the conflict is far from over. Eric still carries immense hatred for Shaw because Shaw murdered his mother right in front of him. Eric can no longer control his anger, so he heads directly toward Shaw's submarine to finally kill him. At the same time, a massive battle begins between Shaw's mutant team and Charles Xavier's mutants. Using his incredible telepathic powers and magnetic abilities, Eric lifts the entire submarine out of the ocean with his own hands and throws it onto land. After that, all the mutants begin fighting each other fiercely. At that moment, Charles tries to stop Eric. He tells him that Shaw should not be killed and that they should hand him over to the US government because the law knows how to punish criminals properly. But Eric refuses to listen. He takes Shaw's special helmet, the device that blocks telepathic powers and prevents anyone from controlling or entering the wearer's mind, and puts it on himself. The moment Eric wears the helmet, all of Charles's mental connection with him is completely cut off. Eric then takes out the same coin that Shaw had once placed in front of him during his childhood. Using that very coin, Eric slowly kills Shaw. Meanwhile, both the Russian and American governments witness the entire incident happening near the shore. After seeing the terrifying powers of the mutants, both sides come to believe that mutants are a danger to humanity itself. Because of this fear, they launch missiles toward all the mutants in an attempt to kill them all at once. When Eric realizes that humans have attacked them, he becomes furious. Using his magnetic powers, he stops all the missiles in midair and turns them back toward the military fleets, intending to kill the humans instead. Moira witnesses this entire incident standing nearby. Unable to tolerate what is happening anymore, she grabs a gun and attempts to kill Eric herself. However, Eric uses his powers to deflect the bullets away from him. But during the chaos, one of the bullets accidentally strikes Charles Xavier directly in his spine. Because of this, Charles becomes critically injured. Eric immediately rushes to Charles and carefully removes the bullet from his back. At first, Eric becomes angry at Moira because he believes that she is responsible for his closest friend's condition. But Charles tells Eric that Moira is not to blame for what happened. Hearing this makes Eric realize that somewhere deep down, the real fault may actually be his own. He begins understanding that Charles was shot because of the violent path he himself chose. At this point, it becomes clear that Charles and Eric have completely different mindsets and visions for the future. Eric believes that mutants should rise above humans, create their own powerful society, and eventually destroy humanity before humans destroy them first. On the other hand, Charles believes that mutants and humans can peacefully coexist together in the same world. Because of these completely opposite beliefs, the paths of the two friends separate forever. Their teams also divide apart. This becomes the reason why Charles later transforms his mansion into Xavier's school, a special place created for mutants where they can learn how to control and master their powers safely. At the end of the movie, Charles kisses his girlfriend Moira and then erases all the memories connected to mutants from her mind. He does this because he fears that she might reveal everything about mutants to the world and expose them to the media and governments. Meanwhile, Eric fully embraces his new identity as Magneto. Alongside his followers, he also frees Emma Frost from the prison where Charles Xavier had once imprisoned her.